Okay, section two, visions of the American West from 1839 to 1816. So the area between the two coasts, the east and the west, um, between the Mississippi and the west coast, really diverse, many different Native American tribes, each with its own culture and language. They had lived together, but we're peacefully, but we're now going to see a distinct change in this period. So we're going to focus on the Plains Indians to begin with. So we've got two major issues that change the way the Plains Indians have lived, uh, from fairly stable trading existence, hunting buffalo on foot or farming. We've got two changes. So first of all, we got the horses brought in by the Spanish, and secondly, the guns brought by other Europeans to hunt the buffalo. Uh, Now we get the buffalo being hunted in very large numbers. Also, because of the pressure from the east and from the west, we get the Native Americans increasingly moving to the Great Plains and towards a more nomadic lifestyle. That trading that previously existed is being replaced by warfare. So let's take a look at a few of these examples of the Native Americans and how they changed. So starting off, I'm going to mark these on the map. We've got the Apache, who are based in the southern part of uh, the plains, the Apache down here. So they originally hunted buffalo with bow and arrow, moved off the plains for harsh winters, and they traded. However, this all changed from the 1830s, where they became more nomadic, and they used horses and guns to hunt the buffalo. And instead of trading with the Navajo and the Pueblo Indians, they now steal their corn, because it's a more effective way of living. So we've got a distinctive change there. Moving further north, and they're divided between the north and the south. Right in the middle here, we've got the northern Cheyenne and the southern Cheyenne. It's a very similar story from farming and hunting settlements. Now they move towards the more nomadic way with warfare. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on these as I focus the Lakota Sioux further north around the Black Hills of Dakota. Again, we've got horses, we've got guns, hunting a buffalo in large numbers. They expand rapidly, begin to live nomads, and they build their lives around the Black Hills of Dakota, as we can see marked on the map, which have got an important religious significance. So have a look further at the Lakota Sioux though. So the buffalo is, as we'll see with all Native Americans, absolutely vital, and that's going to be really important later on as the white settlers attack their use of the buffalo. So they're used for food, for clothing, for shelter. It was very ritualistic with the buffalo dance which lasted several days before a hunting spree. Now we can get we can't get into our heads that they were perfect at this. They often killed many more buffaloes than needed. We've got a horrible story here of one hunting party bringing back 1,400 buffalo tongues, leaving their bodies to rot on the plain. So we can't say it's everything was perfect, but it's still, compared to the numbers we see of buffalo killed later on, it's still small. More signs of the importance of the buffalo is that the teepee is made from buffalo hides, stretched over the wooden poles, easily taken up and down. Conical shape saves them from the wind and allows the smoke to blow from the fire within it. Men's jobs largely hunting and fighting, looking after the horses. The women responsible for the food, making items made from buffalo, looking after the teepee. Located children very valued, but that large part of their lives was preparing for adulthood. And old people were seen as given great wisdom, but were left behind when they could no longer keep up. So there's a great idea here in the importance of nature, in the belief in a great spirit, Wakantanka, that everything has a spirit, rocks, streams, trees, and of course is going to be important when they come up against the whites who fence off their land, and who damage it through mining as well. Land, important part of spirituality, everything came from land, everything returned to land, and contrary to their previous beliefs, the idea that farming was disrespectful. For Lakota Sioux, the Black Hills were sacred land with many buried there. As we saw, they became increasingly militaristic and aggressive, using the horse and gun to defeat their fierce rivals, the Crow and the Mandan. And by the late 1830s, the Lakota were the dominant tribe in their area of the plains. Lakota boys learned to ride. There was rival warrior societies. They gained honor from stealing from each other. And although women generally weren't allowed to fight, there are some exceptions, Buffalo Calf Road being one of them. So what we're going to see now is clashes with the other groups here. So the early migrants, um, so why do they travel in the first place? Well, there was a downturn in the economy, so many of them were looking for a better life, were looking for areas perfect for farming, and stories of the West led to that. In places like Oregon, we had the Preemption Act of 1841, which gave the farmers, settlers, the chance to buy the surrounding land once they'd settled down. Now, there was a lot of work that went into it, but it meant that the rewards were great. Increasingly, journalists are talking about the idea of manifest destiny, that it was God's plan, their destiny, their right to settle the lands and convert the Indians to Christianity. And the maps previously used by mountain men helped to make the settling a simpler process. So it's a very tough journey. First of all, any migrants would have to make this way to one of the towns at the edge of the plains, presumably by railroad. If they were making this journey, it's a tough start even from the very beginning. So winter in one of the towns, such as Independence, we can see marked on the map just here. They would build their own wagons, loads of supplies would be bought, and then when the better weather came in the spring, they'd set off, often travelling in a chain of wagons looking for safety. So they go along this Platte River, where they would be looking for their first idea of how difficult this journey was going to be. Baking hot sun, torrential rain, slow progress, only 18 miles a day. And as they went off they would have to jettison many of their possessions because they realised that they were next to useless from what they originally thought. And then they've got to cross the Rocky Mountains, awful journeys going across here, many accidents, many dying of disease, many caught by snow. And then eventually they reach Fort Hall, where they would have the choice of taking the northern route to Oregon or the southern route to California. And even then, even if they made that journey over to the west, over to Oregon, up here, or to California further south, then they still faced the difficulty of starting a new life, and we'll look at that later on. So 2,400-mile journey, 8 months to complete. Very difficult. Interestingly, although the image you'll often see in films is of white settlers, over a quarter of the population were foreign born, and 3,000 black Americans made this journey as well. Or despite the story and despite the films showing Native Americans, Indian attacks, the most common cause of death was disease. Wasn't long, of course, until they came into conflict with Native Americans, Senator Douglas declaring that the Indian barrier must be removed. And then at 1851 at Fort Laramie, tribes such as the Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, Arapaho, and the Crow gave the USA rights to establish forts and safe routes. Similar sort of story in the southern tribes of Cheyenne, Comanche, Kiowa, also establishing these rights. Part of these rights, however, was to do with giving them time to settle, and the fact that they would granted them US forts, but they would have some time before settlers would come into it, so a guarantee of safety. However, as we can see at the bottom there, 1855 treaty with the Yakima, immediately settlers moved into there despite the 2-year guidance. And not surprisingly, we got conflict. The Yakima start raiding white settlements. The army's called in, and they lost 90% of their land. 24 of their chiefs hanged or shot. So third group, only a short one. The Mormons were a religious group inspired by Joseph Smith's 1830 Book of Mormon. They believed that they could rebuild Jesus' church in America. They attracted large numbers and also large numbers of opposition. Their belief in a shared land and property ownership, lots of people didn't agree with that. Smith himself had a godlike status. They opposed slavery. Their practice of polygamy taken to extremes by their later leader, Brigham Young, who had 55 wives. Polygamy is the practice of being able to marry multiple times. Nevertheless, after Smith's death, they under Young's leadership, they had to what they saw as God kingdoms. traveling 1,300 miles on foot to Salt Lake City, and setting up their own conurbation there, their own safety there, their own sanctuary there at Salt Lake City, as you can see marked on the map, which had a population of over 10,000. Now, it was largely successful because Young very carefully planned the economy. He controlled land, he gave what each family needed, and he organised irrigation so the water was shared in these difficult circumstances, so everyone got their share. 1848, USA took land from Mexico and the area became the territory of Utah, and Young became the first governor. However, all this was wasted. In 1857, we have troops going over to make sure that they followed US laws, and then a dispute and accusations of being spied upon lead to some Mormons murdering some settlers, and scandal meant that Young stepped down as governor. Gold. Gold would change everything in this area. So we have gold discovered in Sierra Nevada, near to California, leading to the Friends of 1849. Wild stories of men making $1,000 a day, with their average wage only be $2 to $3. 50,000 Americans, thousands from Europe, Mexico, traveled to the area. We also have many people making money from the miners, providing pans, picks, tents, blankets, and food. $100 for a new miner. That would be the average cost that they would expect. Some men like Levi Strauss, famous for his jeans, made money initially from this. Now, initially the work was easy. It was surface gold they were looking for, but that by 1852 that had gone, and they started digging out tons of quartz crystal. They created these giant stamp mills, and then they had to go into chemical vats to release the gold. So it becomes more of a science. It becomes more industrial. By 1852, 108 crushing mills dominated the California gold scene. California itself becoming a state in 1850 as a result, with its port of San Francisco becoming a major city. Lumbering starts gathering wood, and farming spread across California for the new town. So it's not only the gold mines themselves, but it also had knock-on effects. Native Americans were initially welcome, but very quickly that changed to hostility. 1850s law, any Indian who could prove he had a job would be arrested and sold to white settlers. Who couldn't prove that they had a job. And if anyone if they were gold mining and couldn't prove they were working elsewhere, they could be sold as slave labour. Hundreds were captured and sold in this way. We have at times whole hillsides being washed away with these high-powered water jets. That causes other problems with flooding. Massive issues for Native Americans. Damage from the chemicals killed the fish and wildlife. Remember their beliefs about the wildlife, about nature. We have a second gold rush in 1858 to 59 in Pikes Peak. Again, we get gold prospectors gaining government protection. Gold fever spreading. 100,000 people, many people heading this way. This time they've got the train lines, means that double the amount are able to go than they had gone to California, and each town promotes itself as the safest way to get there and having an easy route, and that helps the town but also inspired more and more people to go. Farming grows because you can't just have gold, you've got to have food provided for them. So Kansas becomes a state in 1861, the western half's named Colorado Territory, and what we're seeing now is what was seen as a journey, what was seen as a crossing, a road, is now seen as a destination. People are heading to the plains, not to cross to the west, but to stay there, to gold mine, and to stay in the towns. And that's inevitably going to cause issues. So we have cities like Denver are growing in regions where the Arapaho and the Southern Cheyenne were living, meaning that they had to further travel to the hunting lines, and that brings them in conflict with other Native Americans and other whites. Cheyenne and the Arapaho met the US authorities at Fort Laramie saying, we wish to live. They wish to have a way of life, but it looks as if increasingly the US government becomes convinced they're going to have to deal with this Native American threat, and we're going to see that coming up.